Did I mention the fact the Native Americans had been here for about 10,000 years before the Denny's got here? They were on that land for a pretty good reason. Part of the day it's the ocean. It's called tidal activity. Pioneers in the Midwest didn't know about tides. They found out quick enough that afternoon the tides came in and covered almost an entire area. But it did leave them with roughly an 8-acre island just above the water during high tide. They only numbered 24 people at that time, so their leader, Arthur Denny, thought, that's enough land to start with for now. We're going to stick it out. We'll think about the rest later. Now, here's a real reason why they stuck it out with the tides. Right above the tide flats were cliffs. They were actual bluffs, 200-foot bluffs, almost straight up and down, very uniform across. Now, right on top of those cliffs, 400 to 500-year-old trees, mostly cedar and Douglas fir, as far as the eye could see. What do you think Arthur Denny saw in the hills? Exactly. He had a vision. Good, you're playing along like that. He had a vision. His vision was, we'll cut the trees down, skid them down the hill, then load up ships in Elliott Bay with Seattle timber. And that's where the term Skid Road originated. According to Seattle's history books, the original Skid Road in the west is to my left, it's Yesler Avenue. And at some point during the tour, you're going to cross Yesler. When you do, take a look up that hill. It's steep today, 3 times steeper before 1889. You get the point. So Arthur Denny thought, wow, this would be a great place to start a city. We're going to make a lot of money because of the trees in the hills. Therefore, Arthur Denny was our city's first founding father. And you know how we know that. He wrote our first history book where he stated, I'm our city's first founding father. Now, he's not our favorite. Our favorite came second from Cleveland, Ohio. His name was David Swinson Maynard, or Doc Maynard. Bill Spardell decided to do a follow-up to Sons of the Prophets, entirely on Doc, and on top of the book, Bill put the man who invented Seattle. And that's very true. Had this man ever come here, I don't think we'd be here today. Even though he was a medical doctor, he was also one of the planners and the principals behind the building of Cleveland. This man knew how to make a city start and grow. Now, you might be curious, how did Doc find his way to the Northwest? Well, Doc was a Renaissance man. Very intelligent, very curious. When you're a Renaissance man, you try everything, you get bored, and then you move on. Well, at some point, he became bored with Cleveland. He decided to come out west and try his luck in the California Gold Rush. Now, to get to California, Doc traveled along the famous, or in my opinion, the infamous Oregon Trail. One of the things I love about Hollywood, they tend to make the Oregon Trail out to be a fun family trip. It was anything but a fun family trip. The biggest killer on the Oregon Trail was a waterborne disease, very deadly and very contagious, called cholera. You've heard of cholera before. Tough way to die, and it was so contagious, doctors wanted nothing to do with cholera victims on the Oregon Trail, except for the true humanitarian, Doc Maynard. Here's the truth. Now, Doc didn't really have a cure, but Doc had something much better. A very popular frontier medicine called laudanum. Laudanum is a great combination of grain alcohol and opium. So you didn't get cured, but you really didn't care. Now, you still might wonder, how did Doc find his way out to the Northwest? Fate. One day he met his fate on the Oregon Trail. He happened to treat a couple, both very sick from cholera. Sadly, the husband died. Couldn't pull the husband through, but somehow the wealthy and attractive widow pulled through. Yeah, go figure. Yeah, his medical skills just improved. Now, her name was Catherine Brochures. Now, Catherine was never crazy about the Oregon Trail. She just lost her husband. She lost her will to keep going on the trail. Just so happens, Catherine had a brother that lived in this area. Catherine had a brother named Mike Simmons who lived in Olympia, Washington. So she decided to seek out the comfort of her brother. By this time, Doc had fallen in love with Catherine, so he abandoned his plans for Golden, California. He came north to Puget Sound for love. Now, Doc arrived here about 2 months after Arthur Denny. When Doc arrived here, he noticed something that apparently Arthur Denny failed to notice. The fact that the Native Americans outnumbered the settlers, that ratio turned out to be 1,000 to 1. Doc thought it might be a good idea to make friends with the locals. Now, at that time, there were 2 very prominent tribes in this area, the Duwamish and the Suquamish. They had one common chief. His name was Chief Seattle. So Doc did something extraordinary in American history. He decided to become close friends with the Native American chief. And to further cement that friendship, or bond, he also decided to learn the chief's language, Lashutsi. Tough language to learn. And if you want a sample of Lashutsi, At the end of the tour, when you're outside, if you look in the square just to your left, there's a fountain with a bust of Chief Seattle on top. Next to that are 2 storyboards. Well, Chief Seattle was famous for a speech he gave where he told the pioneers, okay, you won, you pushed us off our land, but never forget, our spirits will always be here. So, those 2 storyboards have excerpts from the Chief's famous speech. On one side you have the Shootsy, on the other side you have the English translation. So if you want to see what the Shootsy looks like and how hard it is, take a look at those 2 storyboards. Well, for this friendship, Doc caught quite a bit of grief from his fellow pioneers. Well, Doc was both stubborn and proud. The more grief he got from his fellow pioneers, the further he decided to go with that friendship, and he decided to name the city after his brand new friend, Chief Seattle, to honor the Chief's 2 tribes. So thanks to the very unique relationship between Chief Seattle and Doc Maynard, today we're the largest city in North America named after a Native American chief, and we're very proud of that. So that's just one of the many things Doc did for the city. So I think this would be a great time to introduce Doc Maynard. Now we have 3 founding fathers. The other 2, I'm not going to show you what they look like because the founding fathers, for the most part, do look the same, like the Smith brothers on the cough drop box. Not Doc. He broke them all, and that's why he gets the full cardboard cutout. So there's Doc Maynard, folks. The cape, the hat, and the cane. Now here's the most important thing Doc did for our city. It's the reason why we're here today. I just finished this book last night. Great read. And I know Doc also read this book, but apparently Arthur Denny failed to read this book. It's called Building Cities for Dummies. The first chapter clearly states when you start a city, you have to attract industry. The obvious in Seattle would be timber, right? All the trees in the hills. Arthur Denny had most of this concept down pat. Cut the trees down, skid them down the hill, load up ships in Elliott Bay. Hey Arthur, how about a sawmill to go with your timber industry? Seems like kind of a key component. Apparently not to Arthur Denny, Seattle didn't have a sawmill yet. Well, Doc knew that was the key to unlock the city's financial success, and that's where our 3rd and final founding father came into play. He came from Massillon, Ohio. His name was Henry Yesler. He had just what we needed, the plans and the makings for a steam-powered sawmill. Now, he was in search of a site in this area to open his sawmill up. So that seems perfect, doesn't it? Our trees in the hills, Henry Yesler's sawmill on the waterfront. Would have been perfect, except for this factor. Every small town around the Sound had the exact same characteristics. Everyone had the cliffs, trees in the cliffs, deep water below the cliffs. No one had the sawmill yet. If you could attract the first sawmill around Puget Sound, you're the #1 city overnight. Unfortunately, Henry Yesler knew this. He decided to use his sawmill as leverage against every small town in this area. Well, he met his match in Doc. Doc knew what to do. He watched Cleveland grow. When you start a city, if you want to attract industry, make land deals. Doc made Henry an offer he couldn't refuse. He offered Henry Yesler free waterfront land to open his sawmill on. And he offered him the perfect site for a sawmill in the city, which happened to be right across the street where that rose-colored building is today. But at that time, that was the bottom of Skid Row on the waterfront. Perfect setup. Cut the trees down, skid them down the hill, process the trees in his sawmill, load up those ships. So that's why this site was chosen for a city, and the 3 men that chose this site. Which begs the question, what does this have to do with the underground tour? I'll get to the point. You would think at some point our 3 so-called founding fathers got together and plotted out the way the city should start. Well, if you think that, you don't live here. It's not the way our city works, folks. The 3 founding fathers never got together and came up with a comprehensive plan to build a city. And it was that lack of planning that led to the underground. By the way, that lack of planning has been a constant theme in our city's entire history. Let's get to the point, the way the city was set up at first. Imagine this. The original business area of Seattle, 33 square blocks, was built in this neighborhood at sea level on tide flats. Does that strike you as a wise idea? It's a bad idea. Twice a day the tides come in and flood your dirt streets, turn your streets into mud. That's bad. Oh, that's only the half of it. Biggest problem because of tidal activity was sewage disposal. Yeah, it's going to get rough here, folks, but here we go. It's a big part of our story. Now, at first they tried outhouses. Outhouses in the 1800s were both common and simple. You dig a very deep pit, you put a structure over that pit. And that worked out great for the people that lived on the hills. That's dirt up there. Dig that hole as deep as you please. Didn't work out quite so well, though, for the people that lived on the tide flats. Now, we've all tried to dig a hole into the beach. What happens? Yeah, it fills with water and everything rises. Everything rises. Crossing the streets in Old Seattle was a truly unique experience. You were dodging raw sewage in the streets twice a day. The city needed two things. First of all, it needed some form of a sewer. Well, if you have a sewer, you need to hook something up to that sewer. The toilet. The modern flush toilet at that time was named after its inventor, an Englishman named Thomas A.
Crapper.
Everyone knows Crapper. Now, most people think his first name was John, right? Well, yeah, in a perfect world, it would be John P. Crapper. It's not a perfect world. It's Thomas A. Crapper. And no, I don't know what the A stood for. I'll let you fill in the blanks. Well, he gets credit for inventing the modern flush toilet in the Western world, and this is the way inventions worked in the United States in the 1800s. They would always start on the East Coast. It would take a long time for inventions to come west. In this case, it took 10 long years for the Crappers to arrive in Seattle, but the day did arrive. A big day in early Seattle history. There was a parade right down Main Street. The Crappers had come to Seattle. So, on that very blessed day in early Seattle history, a whole shipload of Crappers pulled into Elliott Bay. Take all the time you needed, folks. Everyone that lived on top of the hill knew exactly what was aboard that ship. They waited 10 years for this day. So when that ship finally came to port, everyone eagerly ran down the hill from the homes, went all the way to the end of the pier. They formed two lines. The woman's line was much longer. Okay, here's the deal. I'm going to still get paid to do this anyway, so you can boo me, you can cheer me, you cannot react at all, I'm still going to get paid. Now anyways, so they picked up their individual crappers inside of a large box, then just as fast as they could, they ran back up the hill to their homes, opened up that box, and they started to read the instructions inside. That was a problem. The instructions in the box said, hook up the pipe in the back of your crapper to your city sewer. They looked in the box for a city sewer. Batteries not included. But don't worry, folks, pioneers don't panic. They adapt. Not only that, this is the Northwest. In the Northwest, we recycle. So the pioneers decided to craft their first sewer. They walked right across the street to Henry's Mill and crafted their first sewer out of wood. Seattle's first sewer consisted of a single, narrow, 6-inch wooden box sewer built on stilts above ground, and it was called a gravity flow system. This is the way it worked. Now, everyone that lived on the hill would hook up their crappers to this single 6-inch box. We're talking 1,000 crappers here. Now, this system was built on the word gravity. The hill that this box sewer ran down had a 49% grade. To put that in perspective, the grade on that hill today, 18%. So back then, that was considered momentum. So when you pull the chain on your crapper, top of the hill, the gravity would force the raw sewage through the box all the way down the hill. Now when it got to the bottom of the hill, well, that was a business area built on tide flats. Can't bury into a tide flat. When the sewer got to the business district, it had to be raised on 7-foot stilts. You could literally walk underneath the sewer in downtown Seattle. Well, the momentum coming off that hill was so intense, it would force the raw sewage through the box, down the hill, all the way through the business area, and then eventually plop out into Elliott Bay. Then the currents would do Seattle a huge favor, take the raw sewage about 30 miles south to our rival city, Tacoma. Perfect system. Not really. What happens twice a day?